I was the class of 1943, scheduled to graduate in June of 43. But they decided during the war to accelerate things, to get us out earlier. So we went to school, or they scheduled school, for the summer of 1942. And then our second semester of the final year would be in the fall of 42, and we would graduate in January of 43 instead of later in the year. Well, what they did was they put all the laboratory courses in the summer session because the professors didn't want to spend their summers in school. So they gave us all the lab work in the summer and then the coursework in the fall, which was kind of ridiculous. But in any event, at that time, I was put into 1A by my local draft board. And it was appealed by the school and turned down, and I fully expected to be drafted. And as a matter of fact, one of my professors had friends in the Army and had it all planned that I would be in the Marine Signal Corps. But be that as it may, I decided, what's the point of going to school all summer? So I decided to cut class. So I went to the library. I read probably 30% of all the books in the Philadelphia Public Library. But in any event, finally the draft board relented on a further appeal by the school and granted a deferment. So I went back to school, and then several weeks later, the draft board rescinded and put me back in 1A, and it went on like this all summer. In any event, I didn't go to school much. I cut about 75% of all the summer session classes. Well, came the beginning of the fall semester, and I finally did get a deferment. And I had to catch up on a lot of work. So I did I went to the labs after school and went through all the experiments that should have been done in the summer and hastily wrote up reports and submitted them and thought I had all caught up. The last day of school, my good friend Bob Goodman and I were sitting in, there was sort of a lounge room in the electrical engineering school, and we were sitting there reminiscing about school year, and in came Dr. Chambers, one of our professors. And he said, "Margolin, I didn't think you were going to make it." And as we chatted, he looked through his little book and he said, here's a lab report you never turned in. This is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, "Well, I'll be in my office till 5. If you get the report in, fine. If not, I'm sorry, I can't give you a passing grade." I think he was kidding, but I wasn't sure. So fortunately, I had the notes, I guess. And Bob Goodman, a very good friend, had his notes. And we sat down and in about a half an hour scribbled up a final report, and I submitted it. Never heard from him. I went to graduation, and I had a job in New York on Long Island. And the day after graduation, I left for New York. I had to go and find a room to rent, a place to live. And I wasn't sure whether I'd graduated until about 2 weeks later. I got my diploma in the mail. And then I was sure that I'd graduated.
Wait, Bob Goodman, who had the boat?
He and I, later, I was working out on Long Island at Airborne Instruments Laboratory in Mineola, and he was working at Hazeltine, which was also on Long Island, and we rented a house together. It was a summer cottage, which we rented in the winter, and the only heat, it had a fireplace, and it had a kerosene stove. There was a tank outside the kitchen window with a pipe that ran in and fed the stove. And by running all the burners on the stove and keeping a fire going in the fireplace, we managed to avoid freezing to death.
But didn't he have a boat? Was this Bob Goodman?
The two of us together bought a boat. What do you call it? It's a class single. It's a centerboard.
Oh, a sailboat. But who's the guy who
Was
had
it
the
a snipe?
motorboat? But who had the motorboat?
Motorboat.
Somebody had a motorboat from Dorn and Margolin. You had a friend who had a motorboat.
Oh yeah, right. That was.
A motorboat, and we went fishing and stopped on some island in the Sound and picked tomatoes. I remember. And no,
Yeah.
yeah. Who was
I
that?
don't remember too many. That was a fellow who worked for us at Dorn and Margolin. Much later.
What?
And what was his name?
Wasn't his name Bob something?
But he had a boat, yes. And we got stuck on a sandbar,
Yes.
at which point he jumped out and
And
pushed us off and hopped
you
back
were
in.
there. You don't
I
know-
went blue fishing. I went fishing with you once, and we
Oh,
came
out in
back
the
with
ocean,
a mess
that
of
was.
bluefish that we would take around the neighborhood wrapped in newspaper. And the joke was that people would pull down the shades, turn out the lights. Quick, the Margolins are coming with more bluefish.
But
Pretend you're not here.
but Dad was remembering Father's Day one year. He went with
No.
Larry to the South Shore because Larry was looking to buy a boat.
I
And they had an
remember
appointment, but it kept getting the guy.
It was
didn't show
Father's
up.
Day, and we kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. We'd been going to go to the movies.
Uh-huh.
And I almost remember the movie. It was can't remember it though, almost, but not quite. In any event, Larry and I got stuck down on the South Shore while they prepared the boat to haul up. And by the time I got home, Mom had gotten angry and took you off to the movies without me.
Probably a Hard Day's Night. Dad and I
Dad
just
thought
watched
it-
The Hard Day's Night recently, and
Could be.
I remember Mom taking us.
Well,
the three of us.
Yes, in Great Neck, I think, and I vaguely remember there was, but I think that was different. I think that was a day, like a Saturday afternoon, and she took us because there was going to be a solar eclipse, and she didn't want us looking at the sun. I'm not kidding, because I remember coming back from the movie, and the movie didn't run as long as she thought,
Oh
and
God, I do
And you
remember
looked at
that.
the eclipse.
yeah, which is yeah. Remember the pinhole camera thing,
Yeah.
the thing, whatever. But, and I think that was a Hard Day's Night.
That could be.
But you remember there was an auto racing movie.
I thought that's very vague recollection.
Do you remember Mom taking us to The Sky Above, The Mud Below?
No, what's that?
Like a documentary about some South Sea island, like what is that place? A book was written about it. Oh, crap. I'll look it up. I'll Google it.
All right.
Now tell the one about Satchel Paige.
That's Satchel Paige. Well, I just think I saw him pitch once, and then when he was in the Negro League. So it was a field near where we lived in West Philadelphia. The field was at 48th and Spruce, I believe. And there was a field, and the Negro Leagues used to play there. There were semi-pro games, and I remember going once, and I'm pretty sure there was Satchel Paige pitching for a team called the House of David. Now, the House of David
Jewish
was a
team.
Negro.
But it was the Jewish team, right?
Yeah.
The House of David.
I don't think so. It was a black team, and they all wore beards. And I'm pretty sure that Satchel Paige was pitching for them.
But he barnstormed and he pitched for, like his, whatever team he was under contract to, he pitched for the Homestead Gray, because I just read the book.
Yeah.
That book by Larry Ty, whatever. The Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords, who were both Pittsburgh-based teams, were like rivals. But then he also kind of farmed himself.
Well, this is probably before.
Hired
Let me
himself
tell you
out.
this. I remember where I lived, so I can tell you where it was. It was before 1930. Because in 1930 we moved away from that neighborhood. So it was probably 1928, 29, somewhere in there. And I was just a kid, I remember. I remember going with Leonard Worzel, who was a neighbor and a very good friend. Yeah, Satchel Paige was the pitcher for.
But I thought the House of David was like at least nominally, the Orthodox Jewish team.
Maybe.
Yeah, right? It was.
I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
The Beards were because they were
Orthodox.
not exclusively, but largely Jewish ball players.
Could
I
be.
thought.
I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he was playing in the team that was playing against the House of David. I don't know.
But you have to tell the story about your uncle, who was the sports reporter who had the tickets to the World Series story about the Philadelphia A's and the game you could have gone to.
1929. The World Series of 1929, where I was out playing.
Oh,
They
yeah.
called me. My Uncle Lou, whose dear friend was Jimmy Dykes of the Philadelphia Athletics, and he had tickets.
Oh, I thought he was a sports reporter or something. No.
Now, my uncle was, I guess he was in business with my father in the real estate business, but he lived with us. That's a long story. It was the Depression years, 1930, thereabouts, 29 or 30, and business was bad, and Uncle Lou's family had moved to California, where her family was living, and he stayed east to close up business affairs, and then he was going out there. But while he stayed east, he lived with us. And he had a bunch of ne'er-do-well friends who included many of the professional ball players on the Philadelphia A's. I remember Jimmy Dykes was one of them. And they're all kind of ne'er-do-wells, heavy drinking fellas. But in any event, the things I really remember about it were that Jimmy Dykes sent us a crate of grapefruits from Florida from their training sessions. And what else? I don't know.
Well, the World Series game.
Oh, that's right, yeah. One day I'm outside playing with the boys, and my mother called me. And I didn't feel like going in, so I pretended I didn't hear. I was out with the boys. And called and called and called, and
And you were.
I just didn't
You
go.
were like 8 years old,
Well, yeah, it was the 29 World Series, I think.
so you were not quite 8.
I was, not quite 8, 7.5. And when I finally did come on, I found that she'd been calling me because Uncle Lou had tickets to the World Series game and was going to take me. I think he ended up taking Cousin Charles instead. He was going to take, I was the first choice because I think Uncle Lou was living with us at the time. Yeah, I'm sure he was.
So the moral is always listen to your mother.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the game.
Oh, yeah, there was something about the game. What was it?
Well, you told me, and I verified, because, always listen to your mother, but don't always believe everything your father tells you. During the baseball season, in the Times anyway, there's always this date in baseball history.
Yeah.
And in October, early October, because that's when the World Series used to be, this year, and it must have been 29, because it was the 80th anniversary of, and it wasn't Game 7, but it was a game of that World Series, and the A's scored 8 or 9 runs.
That's right, in the ninth inning?
I think it was actually not the ninth inning, which would have made it super dramatic, but it's the largest single inning, half inning in World Series history.
Oh.
I think it may have actually been the 7th or the 8th, but they scored 9 runs, trailing 7-0. They scored 9 runs in the 7th or 8th and won.
I don't remember who they were playing.
And won the game. And it was in the Times, and because I was thinking of you when I.
That's right, I remember that now.
It wasn't the Mets.
No, it wasn't the Mets, but I mean,
Before the Mets existed.
it was like a major milestone in World Series history. Anyway.
All right, I'm going to end this one.
Oh,
but
you've been taking
I
pictures
have.
of this the whole time?
I've been filming the whole thing.
But wait, should
I'm
we
going to
do
have
the-
you do. Wait, the Glass
Couldn't
Mountain.
we do it?
What? Oh,
Well,
what one?
Glass Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, the Glass. There's no retelling like Dad's retelling of the Glass Mountain.
But couldn't we do the John Mauchly story?
Oh yeah. Sorry, the John Mauchly story.
John Mauchly was a very nice fellow. He was one of my professors at school. And our senior year, we got together, we collected a few bucks, and sent a delegation across the river to Camden. That's right, it was my car too. It was a 1936 Plymouth. This was 40, which belonged to my brother-in-law Len's brother, who had been drafted. And he gave me the car to take care of while he was gone. So I had this 1936 Plymouth. And I didn't go to Camden, but some of my classmates took the car and went to Camden. And why Camden? I guess liquor was cheaper in Camden. The liquor was always sold in state stores in those days. And the state stores in New Jersey, for some reason, were a lot cheaper than in Pennsylvania. I guess taxes or something. In any event, they bought, 3 or 4 bottles of liquor for the big senior celebration we were going to have. And came back and parked outside of school. And the car was broken into and the whiskey was stolen. And John Mauchly was so sad for us that he replaced it. He gave us money to buy more booze to celebrate graduation. He was a very nice guy.
And who is he?
He's the guy who invented the computer, in essence. He was the chief developer of the ENIAC, the first electronic computer, which was built there. And it was built because this was 1943, and the government needed a way to compute firing tables for naval artillery, which involves a bunch of integral equations, the solving of integral equations for some reason. I don't understand the whole thing. But in any event.
What does ENIAC stand for again?
Electronic Numerical Integrator and Calculator, I think. And Penn had built a forerunner, which was a mechanical integrator. Do you know what a planimeter is?
No.
There? Oh, God. You know what a planimeter is. You know? A thing to measure area. Oh, jeez. Poor benighted children.
Than I am.
Well,
We know what a slide rule is.
Well, this mechanical machine, which was about, let's say, the length from the fireplace to the stove, about that wide, and involved a bunch of rotating shafts and rotating
This sounds like
discs.
major foosball.
Well, rotating discs on which rolled, it's too hard to describe. But if you knew what a planimeter was, you would understand. A planimeter measures area, and which is integration in a way.
Right.
Anyhow, this thing could solve integral equations of a sort. But they needed a much faster way of doing it, and that's how they got into the electronic calculators, which was the forerunner of the modern computer. And Mauchly was the inventor of that, and a very nice guy.
And how big was the first? How big?
ENIAC?
Yeah.
Was very
Rooms
big.
full. Yeah.
It was a room about the size of this whole area, maybe a little wider, with racks and racks and racks of vacuum tubes. And among the large problems were how to get rid of all the heat of the filaments in these vacuum tubes. It took a tremendous air conditioning system just to keep the room bearable. And that was ENIAC.
What was UNIVAC?
UNIVAC was a later one built by IBM, I guess, was it?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I think it was IBM.
Yeah.
But like Mauchly left Penn in a dispute over who had the rights to ENIAC, right?
No. Mauchly wanted to patent it for Penn, and I don't know. They didn't want to put up the money it would take to get the patents and figure it was worth it.
Wow.
So he left and went to
Like, was it Carnegie Mellon or something?
No,
I can't remember reading.
Remington Rand?
Oh.
Maybe Remington. I don't know. But I think a lot of the pen work just fell into, what do you call it when things aren't patented?
Like public domain
Public
or something?
Public domain,
Yeah.
right. And a lot of people went to work on it after that.
Okay, thanks,
So,
Dad.
Okay.
All right.